What could drive someone to commit a brutal murder that shattered lives and left an entire community reeling? A chilling moment of horror no one saw coming. An unimaginable tragedy born from a seemingly insignificant mistake, spiraling into a nightmare that changed the destiny of a couple forever. This isn't just a story of crime. It's a tale of secrets buried for years, truths too dark to face, and consequences no one could escape. Stay with us and subscribe to this YouTube channel as we peel back the layers of deception to reveal the shocking truth behind this unexpected and devastating act. A truth that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. In January 2014, the body of 18-year-old Marianne Santos was found in the living room of a suburban home in Tagbilaran, Bohol. An investigation uncovered the disturbing details of her obsessive relationship with high school coach Rafael Santos, beginning in the fall of 2013 at Tagbilaran High School. A series of events unfolded that would spiral into jealousy, betrayal, and ultimately a night of devastating violence. Rafael Santos had always been the kind of man people gravitated toward. At just 28 years old, his charm and natural ability to connect with others made him a perfect fit for his role as the new basketball coach at Tagbilaran High School. His players admired him not just for his skills, but for how he seemed to truly care about their development, on and off the court. Rafael wasn't just their coach, he was their mentor, a figure they could look up to. Rafael's personal life seemed just as perfect as his professional one. He had recently married Hannah, his college sweetheart, in a beautiful ceremony on April 14, 2012. Hannah was a kindergarten teacher known throughout the town for her gentle demeanor and her love for children. Together, they had just moved into a cozy 3-bedroom house on the edge of Tagbilaran. The house wasn't large, but it was full of possibilities. Space for a nursery, a backyard for a swing set, and a future filled with the kind of love and warmth that Rafael and Hannah dreamed of. For Rafael, the transition to married life was both exciting and challenging. Balancing the demands of his new job and his commitment to Hannah required more energy than he had anticipated. Hannah, ever supportive, encouraged him to pour his passion into his coaching, assuring him that they would always find time for each other. They spent weekends decorating their home and talking about their plans for the future. Hannah even started collecting baby names, carefully jotting them down in a small notebook she kept by the bed. Marianne Santos, meanwhile, was living a very different life. At 17 years old, she was the star cheerleader of Tagbilaran High School. Her stunning looks and outgoing personality made her the center of attention wherever she went, but behind her radiant smile was a girl desperate for love and stability. Marianne had grown up in a broken home with parents who were more interested in their own arguments than in raising their daughter. Her father had left when she was 10, and her mother, battling alcoholism, barely managed to keep their small apartment livable. Marianne had learned early on how to fend for herself. The instability at home shaped Marianne into a master manipulator. She knew how to use her beauty and charm to get what she wanted, and she wasn't afraid to push boundaries to escape the chaos of her personal life. Despite her popularity at school, Marianne carried a deep sense of insecurity. She longed for someone to see beyond her exterior, someone who would provide her with the love and validation she never received at home. Rafael became that someone. And it started innocently enough. It was September 2012, and Rafael had been at Tagbilaran High for just a few months. Marianne often stayed late after cheerleading practice, lingering near the gym to watch the basketball team. At first, it was just a harmless crush. She admired how confident Rafael was, how he commanded respect from his players while maintaining a sense of approachability. To Marianne, he wasn't just a coach. He was the kind of man she imagined could save her from the life she desperately wanted to leave behind. For Rafael, Marianne's attention was flattering. He was adjusting to his new role as a husband and a coach, but the pressures of both were starting to weigh on him. The late nights spent reviewing game strategies often meant less time with Hannah, who was busy managing her classroom of energetic 5-year-olds. When Marianne began complimenting him, praising his coaching skills or commenting on his leadership, Rafael felt a sense of validation he hadn't realized he craved for such a long while. By October 2012, their interactions had become more frequent. Marianne found reasons to talk to Rafael after practice, sometimes asking for advice about school or claiming she needed help with her cheer routines. Rafael, caught off guard by her attention but unwilling to be rude, always obliged. Their conversations were initially light-hearted, but over time, they became more personal. Marianne spoke about her struggles at home, how she often felt like no one cared about her, how she longed for a better life. Raphael, with his natural tendency to mentor and support, found himself feeling protective of her. One evening, in late October, after a particularly grueling practice, Raphael stayed late in his office to finish some paperwork. Marianne knocked on the door, claiming she had left her phone in the gym. When she entered, she thanked him for always being so kind to her. Marianne spoke about how much she admired him, not just as a coach, but as a person. She told him he was the only adult who seemed to truly care about her. For Raphael, the moment was emotionally complicated. He saw Marianne as a troubled young woman looking for guidance, but the intensity of her words made him feel something he wasn't ready to acknowledge. The line between teacher and student began to blur, and Raphael, though hesitant, didn't stop it from happening. By November 2012, their meetings had become more frequent. What started as casual conversations in the gym turned into private moments in Raphael's office after hours. Marianne, emboldened by Raphael's initial kindness, began to push boundaries. She dressed more provocatively during practices, ensuring she caught his attention. Raphael, battling a growing sense of guilt, tried to rationalize their interactions. He told himself he was simply being a mentor, a source of stability in Marianne's chaotic life. But Marianne wanted more. She craved Raphael's attention and grew frustrated when he tried to keep their relationship professional. She began testing him, lingering longer after practice, accidentally brushing against him during conversations, and finding excuses to text him outside of school hours. Marianne knew how to exploit Raphael's vulnerabilities, and she used every tool at her disposal to pull him closer. By December 2012, their relationship had crossed the line. Late one evening, after a home game, Raphael found himself alone in the gym with Marianne. The tension that had been building between them finally erupted in the quiet of the empty gym, with only the faint hum of the overhead lights. Raphael, overwhelmed by a mix of desire and guilt, knew he had made a terrible mistake, but the connection they shared was undeniable, and Marianne wasn't about to let him go. Their affair became a carefully guarded secret. They met late at night in Raphael's office or under the bleachers when they were sure no one else was around. Marianne was careful to maintain her image at school, but her obsession with Raphael grew stronger with each passing day. For Raphael, the affair became a source of constant inner turmoil. He loved his wife and hated himself for betraying her, but he couldn't seem to extricate himself from Marianne's grasp. By January 2013, the cracks in their secret began to show. Marianne grew increasingly possessive, often texting Raphael late at night and demanding his attention. She would ask probing questions about his marriage, fishing for signs that he was unhappy with Hannah. Raphael, trying to salvage what remained of his conscience, began to pull away, but Marianne wouldn't allow it. For her, the affair wasn't just a fling, it was her lifeline, her escape from a life she despised. Marianne's obsession reached a breaking point when she noticed Hannah attending more of Raphael's games. The way he smiled at his wife, the pride he showed when introducing her to his players, drove Marianne into a jealous rage. She couldn't stand the thought of Raphael giving Hannah the love and attention she believed should be hers. The stage was set for a confrontation that would forever change their lives. What began as a reckless indulgence had become a dangerous entanglement, one that neither Raphael nor Marianne could control. What would Marianne do next, and how far would she go to keep Raphael by her side? By July 2013, life for Raphael and Hannah Santos seemed picture perfect. To the outside world, they were a young, beautiful couple with a promising future. Hannah, who had always been the backbone of their relationship, exuded grace and positivity despite Raphael's long hours as a basketball coach. She made it a point of duty to attend every game she could, her growing belly, a proud sign of the life they were building together. But underneath the smiles and loving gestures, Raphael carried a burden that grew heavier with each passing day. His affair with Marianne had spiraled out of control, morphing from a reckless mistake into a source of constant fear and anxiety. Marianne's obsession had become relentless. Her once flirtatious texts were now desperate messages demanding his attention. She would show up unannounced at the gym, waiting for him after practice, her eyes burning with a mix of anger and longing. Marianne's world revolved entirely around Raphael. Her obsession consumed her, fueled by the emptiness of her own life. She had no family to turn to, no true friends to confide in. Her grades began to slip, and her attendance at cheerleading practice became erratic. Marianne's coach grew concerned, but Marianne brushed off the questions with vague excuses. On August 14, 2013, everything changed during a game at Tagbilaran High. Hannah made an unexpected appearance. She wore a loose-fitting dress that barely concealed her growing baby bump. Raphael spotted her in the stands and couldn't help the smile that spread across his face. To him, Hannah was a beacon of light in his dark and complicated world. Marianne, standing on the sidelines in her cheerleading uniform, saw the exchange and felt a surge of uncontrollable rage. Marianne couldn't comprehend how Raphael could still love his wife when she had risked everything for him. She hated the way his face lit up for Hannah, the way his gaze lingered on her even as he coached the game. That night, when Hannah approached Raphael to congratulate him after the game, Marianne stood in the shadows watching them with a clenched jaw and trembling hands. The announcement of Hannah's pregnancy, made casually to a group of players and their families after the game, was the final blow. Marianne left the gym abruptly, slamming the door behind her as she fought back tears. To her, the pregnancy was a betrayal, a permanent symbol of Raphael's love for his wife and the life he was building without her. From that moment on, Marianne's thoughts became consumed with one goal: removing Hannah from the picture. Raphael, oblivious to the storm brewing in Marianne's mind, decided it was time to end the affair once and for all. On August 20th, 2013, after a late practice, he called Marianne into his office. What he intended to be a final conversation quickly turned into a volatile confrontation. Marianne begged, threatened, and cried, alternating between declaring her love for him and warning him about what she could do if he left her. Raphael remained firm, walking away from her sobs, echoing in the empty gym. By November 1st, 2013, Marianne's obsession had reached dangerous new heights. Raphael had stopped responding to her texts and avoided her as much as possible. Her carefully constructed world of manipulation and control was crumbling, and she was determined to reclaim the power she felt slipping through her fingers. That rainy afternoon, Marianne drove to the Santos household. She knew Raphael wouldn't be home. He was at the school preparing for an upcoming tournament. Marianne had no real plan, only the determination to see Hannah face to face. As she pulled into the driveway, her mind raced with possibilities. If she could just talk to Hannah, maybe she could scare her enough to make her leave Raphael. Or perhaps she could find something, anything, that would give her leverage over them. Hannah, ever the gracious hostess, answered the door with a warm smile despite the rain. She didn't know Marianne well, but recognized her from the cheerleading team. What do you think could be her intention for coming to visit Hannah when Raphael wasn't around? Please comment your answers below, like, and don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel to be part of our family. Marianne feigned politeness, claiming she had forgotten her jacket in Raphael's car and needed to ask him something. Hannah, not suspecting anything, invited her inside and offered her a glass of water. Marianne accepted, her eyes darting around the house. As she stepped into the kitchen, it was then that Marianne noticed the cup of tea sitting on the counter. Hannah had been drinking it earlier while tidying up. The idea struck Heather like lightning. She had no real plan, but the opportunity seemed too perfect to pass. As Hannah turned her back to retrieve the water, Marianne slipped a small vial of poison she had hidden in her bag into the tea, her hands trembling as she poured the liquid. Her heart raced at the thought of what she was about to do. Marianne didn't stick around long. She thanked Hannah and left, her heart pounding as she walked back to her car. She told herself it was just enough poison to make Hannah sick, to scare her into leaving Raphael, but deep down, she wanted more. She wanted to erase Hannah from Raphael's life entirely. Later that evening, Hannah began to feel unwell. At first, it was just a dull ache in her stomach, but by midnight, the pain had become unbearable. Raphael rushed her to the hospital, panic etched across his face. The doctors worked quickly, but the damage was done. Hannah had suffered a miscarriage, and the baby they had dreamed of was gone. Raphael was devastated, but his grief quickly turned to suspicion. Something about the timing felt off. Marianne had been at the house earlier that day, uninvited and unexpected. The thought dawned at him, but he had no proof. When he confronted Marianne the next day, she denied everything, her expression cold and unyielding. She warned him that he hadn't seen what she was truly capable of. Raphael didn't know how to protect his wife from the growing storm, but he knew one thing for certain: Marianne wasn't going to let go without a fight. By January 2014, the lives of Raphael, Hannah, and Marianne were already in shambles, though the world around them remained oblivious. Marianne's obsession had reached its breaking point. Her once charming and flirtatious demeanor had become erratic and unhinged. At her 18 years old, Marianne had become consumed by her fixation on Raphael, seeing him not as a person but as a possession. A life raft in the storm of her broken world, she felt betrayed, not only by Raphael's rejection, but by Hannah's continued presence in his life. A presence that symbolized everything Marianne believed she could never have. Raphael, meanwhile, was living in constant fear. He had distanced himself as much as he could from Marianne after the poisoning incident, but knew deep down that she was a threat. He hadn't told Hannah the full extent of the affair, trying to shield her from the worst of it, but the guilt weighed heavily on him. Raphael had grown quieter, more withdrawn. He threw himself into his coaching, often taking on extra practices or games to avoid facing the crumbling remains of his personal life. Hannah, still recovering from the loss of their baby, noticed the distance but attributed it to grief. By early January, she had begun to rebuild herself emotionally, leaning on her parents and close friends for support. She spent her days preparing their home for a fresh start, hoping that the arrival of spring might bring a sense of renewal. She was determined to repair her marriage, unaware of the true depth of Raphael's betrayal or the danger lurking in the shadows. Marianne, however, could not move on. For her, the months following the poisoning had been a blur of rage and despair. She spent hours scrolling through Raphael's social media, analyzing every post and photo for signs of happiness with Hannah. The sight of the couple together fueled her growing hatred. By January 10, 2014, Marianne made a decision. If she couldn't have Raphael, no one could. On the evening of January 15, 2014, Marianne put her plan into action. She knew Raphael would be away coaching and away, leaving the house empty except for Hannah. Armed with a handgun she had stolen from her stepfather months earlier, Marianne drove to the Santos home. The neighborhood was quiet, the street lights casting long shadows over the suburban lawns. She parked a few houses down and walked the rest of the way. The cold air was biting at her skin as she rehearsed what she would say to Hannah. Breaking into the house was easier than Marianne had anticipated. The back door had been left unlocked, a mistake Hannah often made in her small, trusting community. Inside the house was warm and still, a stark contrast to Marianne's chaotic mind. She wandered through the living room, her fingers brushing over picture frames on the mantel. Each photo of Raphael and Hannah smiling together only deepened her resolve. Marianne didn't have to wait long. At around 8:45 p.m., Hannah returned home, her arms full of groceries. She was startled to find Heather sitting in the living room, but her natural politeness kept her from reacting harshly. Marianne's calm exterior quickly dissolved into anger, and she began accusing Hannah of ruining her life. Hannah was confused and scared, but she tried to reason with Marianne, keeping her voice steady. As she backed toward the kitchen, Marianne followed, pulling the gun from her jacket. The sight of the weapon changed everything. Hannah's fear became palpable, but she kept her composure. She knew she needed help and, thinking quickly, reached for her phone on the counter, pretending to fumble with it. She managed to dial 911 and whispered her address before Marianne realized what she was doing. When Marianne heard the faint voice of the dispatcher on the other end of the line, her panic erupted. She grabbed Hannah by the arm and pulled her into the living room, yelling at her to sit down. Hannah complied, her heart racing as she tried to think of a way to escape. The minutes felt like hours as they waited for the inevitable arrival of the police. At 9:03 p.m., the sound of a siren filled the air. Marianne's desperation turned to fury. She accused Hannah of calling the police, waving the gun erratically as she paced the room. When the first police car pulled into the driveway, Marianne's erratic behavior escalated. She fired a shot, grazing Hannah's shoulder. The pain was sharp and immediate, but Hannah used the chaos to crawl behind a couch, shielding herself as best as she could. Her heart was pounding. She exerted herself as best as she could. The police, hearing the gunshot, moved quickly. They shouted commands from outside, trying to negotiate with Marianne, but she was beyond reasoning. Marianne barricaded herself in the house, firing wildly at the officers. In the chaos, one officer was struck and killed, a 32-year-old father of two, whose life was also claimed by this tragic night. By 9:20 p.m., the standoff reached its climax. The police stormed the house, their movements swift and decisive. Marianne fired at them, her shots wild and panicked. The officers returned fire, and Marianne was struck multiple times. She collapsed in the living room, her blood pooling on the hardwood floor, her obsession and rage extinguished in an instant. The events of January 15, 2014, left the Tagbilaran community in shock. The once quiet neighborhood became a crime scene, the flashing lights of police cars illuminating the tragedy that had unfolded. News of the murder spread quickly, and within hours, Raphael's affair with Marianne was exposed. The revelation destroyed Raphael's reputation. Parents withdrew their children from his team, demanding his resignation. Though Raphael cooperated fully with the investigation, admitting his role in the events that led to the tragedy, the public viewed him as complicit. By February 2014, Raphael had resigned from his position and disappeared from public life, retreating to an unknown location to escape the scrutiny. Hannah survived her physical injuries, but struggled to recover emotionally. By March 2014, she had moved back in with her parents, filing for divorce shortly after. The betrayal and trauma were too much for her to bear, and she could no longer see a future with Raphael. Her once bright outlook on life was dimmed, replaced by the weight of grief and betrayal. Marianne's story became a cautionary tale. The media painted her as a troubled young woman, a victim of her circumstances, but also a perpetrator of unimaginable violence. Debates about mental health, accountability, and the ethics of relationships between teachers and students raged on, but for those who knew her, Marianne remained a symbol of how unchecked obsession and despair could spiral into tragedy. The Santos home, once filled with hope and promise, stood empty for months. The neighborhood eventually returned to its routine, but the memory of that night lingered as a chilling reminder of how lives could unravel in the wake of love, betrayal, and obsession. This harrowing chapter of Raphael, Hannah, and Marianne's lives would forever serve as a testament to the devastating consequences of secrets and unbridled emotion. The tragic events in Tagbilaran left a lasting impact on everyone involved. It was a story of love, betrayal, and the dangerous consequences of unchecked obsession. A once promising life ended, a family was torn apart, and a quiet town was forever changed by the secrets and lies lurking beneath its surface. Let's play a game. If you think what Marianne did was wrong, subscribe to this YouTube channel. Let us know what you think in the comments below. But if you feel what she did was right, you can skip.